you are. All right, this lady is an environmentalist. She's an activist. She's a feminist. She's a journalist for New Matilda. Please welcome Wendy, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. And it's amazing to stand today with all of you in this park protesting against the Abbott government and working towards a big change. And we're not just here in this park. What we know is that there are thousands of other Australians who've marched in Melbourne this morning and everywhere from the Fraser Coast in Queensland to Castlemaine in Victoria, there are marches. There were marches There were marches yesterday. You might have heard about them from, they call it your media, but nevertheless, there were about 6,000 in Lismore, hundreds in Gympie, Toowoomba, Darwin, the ADC did mention that, and other places. And this should give us all great hope. Yeah. Now, one of the reasons I supported March in March, and I'd like to, at this point, congratulate every organiser who took a step to do something different, who took a risk. We took a risk to go against the cynicism that said it couldn't work, that it was controlled by someone outside, controlled by a political party. They took a risk, and I'd like to congratulate all of you who came to support them and to be part of this movement. Now, one of the reasons I did, and I think this is being touched upon by Billy Braggs and others, is that this isn't just about one issue, it's about many issues. And while different issues may spark each individual, for some it will be violence against women. For some it will be the difficult and stressful lives of single mothers put back on New Start. For others it will be rolling back any action on climate change which already was not enough. For others it will be the unbelievable, brutal treatment of asylum seekers that we never, even in the worst days of Woomera, imagined anything like this could be possible. But the fact that we have had these huge demonstrations suggests that more and more people realise that we need to link together and say it's enough. That there must be a better way to run our country. Now, my theme today, the theme I was asked to address, is environment and media. And while other speakers have talked to you about asylum seekers, what I'd like to say is the purpose of the hatred-inspired media against people arriving seeking asylum by boat, or the endless, cynical focus of the media on political leadership? Is this all about turning us aside and distracting us from big business, particularly big mining?
One world government, globalisation, new world order.
Big mining supported by big media to attack the working and living conditions of Australians while they rip as much out of our earth as possible with the short-term goal of making maximum profits while risking irretrievable massive damage to the earth, human beings and other species. Now we're in a race to change those policies, to shift to safe renewable energy rather than risking the health of rural communities by fracking and open-cut mining. But we're also here to close Nauru and Manus and so many other abuses that are happening in our onshore detention centres. Now, the attack on the environment by this government began with the removal of the Climate Commission.
Which was appalling!
And we should, and the dismantling of other community policies. But we should take heart from the fact that so many Australians supported the re-establishment of the Climate Council, which is already putting out regular reports You may not see them in your media, but they are there, and you can easily find them on the internet and in some media. Now, this is only just the beginning of the attack on the environment. What this attack is, it's designed to happen so quickly and on so many fronts that it immobilises our environmental movements. The federal government is working in concert with conservative state governments. They're opening up our national parks. They're going to open up the forests of Tasmania.
You're gonna have to come through me.
They're cutting off funds to support biodiversity. From the threatened rhinoceros in Sumatra to the sharks in Western Australia. They're assisting the shark culling.
Fuck that!
They're expanding our marine parks. And they're threatening our Great Barrier Reef. This government is anti-knowledge. It's anti-science. It's anti-education.
Anti-Australian.
It's taking away assistance to our community to exercise our rights over planning and to have a say over our environment. And those rights were fought for over many years, and they've been dismantled over the last 10 or so years. They are cutting thousands of science research jobs, including environmental science jobs. But instead, in their place, they're appointing some climate skeptics that have been completely discredited in public media, and they're people who absolutely deny what 97% of scientists in the world say about climate change.
It's a hoax.
This is propaganda. It is undermining policy. It is government at its worst.
Suicide.
And they've cut all into, and this government, has cut, did you know this? You possibly didn't, because possibly your media didn't bother to tell you that they've cut all environmental international programs and they're destroying our environmental defenders' offices. And without and the only reason you could possibly want to cut the environmental defenders' offices is to take away our right to use our legal rights. But I don't think we should be too pessimistic. I think we need to remember the amazing grassroots defence of the Kimberley, what's going on at the moment with the sharks, our amazing Lock the Gate movement, the activists in the coalfields, and the defence of our Great Barrier Reef. And we need to remember and know that without these movements and others that will grow and build on them, the forests, without those movements, the forests, the reefs, and even more species would have been destroyed many years ago. Now, I'm old enough to remember the Green Band movement. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of it, but if it wasn't for the Green Band movement, most of the suburbs around here would have been knocked down and replaced by high-rise. Yes, a lot of low-income tenants were driven out, but we did save a lot of it, and that was done by people sitting in cranes, people on building sites, little groups all around Sydney meeting in their resident action groups, just like they are in 400 groups to stop the federal government's new planning regime at the moment. That was how we achieved change there. But many Australians, of course, have no knowledge of the scale of this destructive, large-scale attack on our environment. And that is because, and it's really quite simple, that some big media choose actively every day to keep people in the dark, to produce silence and ignorance. Meanwhile, those same big media lecture us every day about press freedom and how we must hold our leaders accountable, except, of course, for their favoured leaders. And the purpose of the media is supposed to be to inform citizens of contemporary events and hold power accountable. Recently, I won't go into the details, but I did a pretty big study about how the media has covered climate change. And what I found is that the publications with the biggest audience, publications, newspapers and online, and I'm particularly talking talking about News Corp, which owns the biggest outlets in Australia and the only serious outlets in Brisbane, Hobart, Adelaide and Darwin. Where in Darwin, by the way, their outlet, the Northern Territory News, only mentions climate change once on an average of every 5 weeks, and that is usually a long diatribe by Andrew Bolt, who is Andrew Bolt is syndicated all around Australia. He's on 2TV every weeknight. He's on Channel 10. Now, News Corp, when I produced my report, dared to say that the company recognises human-induced global warming. Well, they might, but they don't want the Australian people to know about it. Otherwise, I don't think we should focus too much on Andrew Bolt. I think we should focus on News Corp. They're the people who hire him, pay him, and when they don't want to, believe me, they won't. Now, people say we shouldn't worry about this, that it's only 1 million or so readers, and that's true. And that most of us wouldn't read it if we didn't have anything, even if we didn't have anything else to read. But the fact is, the hatred and abuse that goes across so many issues, that spews out of these publications, I see it like memes. It's repeated, it's repeated, it's repeated in the clubs, and it's repeated on public transport, it's repeated in the home and on television, until it becomes fixed. And I was struck yesterday by a quote from Tony Benn, the Labour leader who died a couple of days ago in the UK. He talked about Thatcherism as a virulent strain, like a virus that can get implanted, and it's really hard to turn it back. It's toxic! Now, there are two features to a lot of this. There's the propaganda, there's the hatred, and then there's the silence. And believe me, even major reports that you would expect will get like a little past someone, a little somewhere, a little mention. Only you often don't get reported at all, and if they do, it's usually in a place where no one's going to see them. Now, of course, this is not usual in global terms. Most media around the world are not sceptic. Not surprisingly, most journalists accept what 97% of the world's scientists say. And when and if a dissident scientist comes along, of course, as journalists, we should scrutinise them, but not when they've already been discredited by easily available information. Now, we have the most sceptic media in the world in Australia, and that's because we have the most concentrated media in the world, and that the dominant player in that media is News Corp. Now, just for a moment, I want to be a little bit practical and talk about how I think we can change that media. Many people, as we saw on Twitter and Facebook today, who attended marches yesterday, were bitterly disappointed that it got so little coverage. I expect that to pick up today. The prospects of media reform are very slim. There was some prospects under the previous government, but they didn't work out. And in fact now, the Abbott government and Malcolm Turnbull want to threaten even further what little regulation we have, and allow a further grab for power by big media, especially News Corp. Now, what can we do? I think we have to support our public media. It may sometimes disappoint us, but we must support it. That includes the ABC, SBS, and of course the ABC is very important, but I urge you to watch every once a week at least. Some people will do it much more. Watch NITV and give them respect. That's the National Indigenous Television. Yeah! We should support those journalists and publications inside the mainstream media that do try to hold power accountable. I know from having worked as a journalist in mainstream media, you do work against the constraints. You do try to do your job. We should support it when it happens, and when it doesn't happen, we should not hold back in our criticism. Yeah. But beyond that, we need to build our own democratic media. We can't wait. In fact, it's going to go downhill further. We need to build a citizens' media, and of course the seeds of that are very much already there. But if we think about an event like this, it didn't need to happen like it happened yesterday. It's easy to train citizen journalists to go out and feed in news reports and compile reports. We need to build a better media, and that is part of building a grassroots movement for change. Now, look, I wanted to say that I think a focus on Abbott is very understandable. And few of us will forget him standing in front of a ditch the witch sign at the anti-carbon policy rally. Which we will also not forget got blanket coverage, while a march of 5,000 in Lismore, by the time I left home this morning, hadn't made it onto the local media's website or onto national or state media. That is not accidental. There is a structural bias that produces that. But I agree also with the Indigenous speaker in Darwin yesterday, Larrakia woman, Arlie Mills, who stressed that we need to look behind Abbott at who is pushing the decisions.
The international Rangers!
A puppet even sounds like a puppet. And the whole idea that we have him as our Minister for Women Year 9 students from Newtown showed on Friday the purple tie is just a purple tie, and you don't need to scratch him very hard. But after a couple of questions about women, he said, let's have one from a bloke. Against the Abbott government very clear, and we need to thwart his policies. And I know that many of you, probably all of you, take small daily actions in your lives to try to turn things around. But the fact is, we are going to have to do more. We must talk to those who we know and talk to those we don't yet know about why we're here and how we can combine issues to bring about change. We need to learn from the past, but we need to make our own future. We won't all agree. Difference and discussion are always part of change. But the biggest step is to overcome the cynicism that Billy Greggs talked about, to overcome that cynicism and to believe that each of us is important.
And the apathy!
And that by acting together, we can, step by step, make a different society and bring about some real change. Thank you very much.